Mountain Dew saved me a pretty traumatic memory that my cousin wasn't lucky enough to avoid. When I was around 8 to 10 years old, I'd spend a few weekends out of the summer at my Uncle Tony's. My cousin Christopher and I were around the same age, and Tony would take us fishing the morning after I arrived. I always really looked forward to this weekend, and it wouldn't be uncommon for me to already be awake as Tony came downstairs to make us breakfast before leaving. To wake us up fast, he gave us Mountain Dew at the crack of dawn. It would get us all jazzed up on caffeine. I especially like Mountain Dew, so it's safe to say I had a bit more than I probably should have. The lake we fished at was a little over an hour away. At the halfway point, there's this rest area we stop at for coffee and cookies. Tony's made it a tradition, and this time I'm extra eager because the Mountain Dew I'd consumed had filled my bladder to emergency status. When we pulled into the rest stop parking lot, Tony and I got out to use the facilities. Christopher stayed in the truck playing his Sega Game Gear. He had his headphones plugged into the aux cable and was completely immersed in whatever he was playing. He's using a portable car charger that's plugged into the cigarette lighter. Tony leaves the car running for him so as not to kill the Game Gear's charge. We were going to be quick. I was already running for the bathrooms. Tony, probably being more concerned about creeps in the bathroom than creeps in the parking lot, takes off in a light jog behind me. In our defense, we were fast. The truck was physically out of sight for a maximum 3 minutes. And there was also a large wooden rowboat strapped to the back of it. Uncle Tony and I are walking back from the bathrooms. The parking lots are directly in front of us, but we're headed towards the coffee and cookies, which is diagonal to where we parked. But the view of the parking lot begins to open up as we head towards it. That's when Uncle Tony stops and says, "Where's the fucking truck?" In the time it took from us to get from the bathrooms to back, someone had stolen Tony's truck, boat, and literal firstborn child. It was in the blink of an eye. The truck had already made it onto the freeway. Tony ran to the woman at the coffee counter, asking if she'd seen anything, but she couldn't help us. We used a payphone to dial 911. I stand next to Tony as he frantically tells the operator what's happened. Meanwhile, in the truck, it's not until the truck is actually merging onto the interstate that Christopher looks up and realizes it wasn't us in the truck. He takes his headphones out and asks the man what he's doing. The guy smells like garbage. He looks in the rearview mirror back at Christopher, surprised and angered at what he sees in the back seat. He then pulls a knife from inside of his coat pocket. He holds it back to Christopher, demanding that he crawl into the front seat with him. Christopher said his eyes looked like large rodent eyes. The truck would be dangerously swerving, and his eyes would dart back from him to the road, and then back to him again when he gained control. Christopher doesn't comply, so the man starts yelling, telling him to take off his clothes. He's basically telling Christopher that he's going to sexually assault him all the way up the I-90. While he's telling Christopher this crazy stuff, he's unbuttoning his pants and trying to pull them down with his hand while using his knees to steer. The next time the truck swerved into an adjacent lane, it sideswiped a small car. The car goes left into the guardrail. The truck jerks right in an attempt to correct, but it's going too fast and begins to jackknife before it all flips. Christopher's thrown from the truck as it begins to turn over. His body sent through the open passenger window into the grass of the median. The truck flipped from under, so he was launched straight down instead of up and out like a catapult. Which I think is the best case scenario, given the options. Bystanders wouldn't let the driver leave, so police were able to arrest him. Meanwhile, back at the rest stop, a trooper takes me and Uncle Tony to see Christopher at the hospital. He would have both of his legs broken in the accident. He'd have to spend the rest of that summer and most of that fall trying to get strength back in his legs to walk again. Still, even now, He says that accident was definitely him dodging a bullet, and had they not crashed, he'd be worse off than he is now. So, thanks to TikTok's Kia challenge, almost everyone knows exactly how easy it is to steal my car. If you're one of those few who still hasn't seen it, like I was, then allow me to enlighten you. These dicks figured out a way that you can start the engine with a frickin' USB plug. All you gotta do is rip off the plastic thing under the wheel and rip out the part that you put your key inside of. Then a USB port fits perfectly in place of a key. God, I still can't believe this shit. I used to own a 2015 model, but I lived in a rural area outside of a small town until January 17th, when I moved to the suburbs of a bigger city. Just 2 days later, my car was stolen on a Friday night. Well, it was around 1 a.m., so technically Saturday, but whatever. That morning, I showered, ate, and all that good stuff before I planned to spend the weekend settling into my new place. Aside from stocking the kitchen, it's a bigger house than my old one, so I wanted to get a few new things to fill in the empty spaces. Except when I got outside, my car was gone. Since my new refrigerator came the day before, I had parked on the curb to let the delivery truck pull into the driveway, and I never moved it back. I doubt that it would have prevented the theft, but at least my Ring doorbell would have gotten a better shot of the assholes that took it. All mine caught was a tall person dressed in black, but the neighbors were kind enough to share theirs too. The collective footage reveals another Kia pulling up behind mine, but none of the driver's features are discernible through the tinted window. From the time they pull up to the moment they drove off, it only took a few seconds. That's when the police explained how simple it was. They also said that the cars are sometimes found in hours, sometimes in days or weeks. Sometimes it's never. I spent most of the first day reading stories from other Kia owners, including one lady who lost her car the day before she moved. I can't even imagine how much that must have sucked. Of the people who actually got their cars back, many reported that it was stolen by teens going for a joyride. In some cases, the kids actually recorded their crime. Unfortunately, the majority of those ended their video by crashing, some on purpose, some by accident. But, out of the ones I read at least, those were usually solved within the same day or the next. Then there were the stories where cars were stolen specifically to commit other crimes. Those got pretty scary. They weren't all gas station and liquor store robberies. Some were straight-up kidnappings and murders. One guy said they used his car to trick his girlfriend into coming outside when they tried to abduct her. Thank goodness she was able to get back inside and call the police. Another guy's car was stolen from a parking garage and found weeks later with a dead body in the trunk, while others have been covered in blood and all kinds of fluid. I knew when reading those that, yeah, this feels more like my luck, but I was still hoping for joyriders. If I was really lucky, they would get pulled over before wrecking and everything would be fine. But yeah, that didn't happen. Yesterday, just over a week after being stolen, my Kia was found. Rather than trying to convey this in the same choppy order I learned it, I'm just going to tell you what actually happened. Again, this is a late Friday night, early Saturday morning situation. Only this time it's out in the middle of nowhere, on some random back roads. A couple in a large Chevy were on their way home when a Kia came speeding around a curve, almost hitting them. Both drivers swerved to avoid a collision, which sent my car careening off-road where it flipped and rolled down a small embankment. The truck's driver pulled over safely and rushed to the embankment while his wife called for help. Upon shining his light over the edge, he saw that the passenger was already pulling the driver out of the wreckage. The man from the Chevy held out his flashlight while the two Kia boys climbed up the embankment. Back at the couple's truck, the wife was still on the phone with 911, and the man who'd been driving the Kia asked if he could speak to the operator. Only once he got the phone, he hung up and pulled out a gun. The passenger had one as well, and they fled in the Chevy. Had the wife not already called for help, they would have probably been stranded overnight or worse. I'm so grateful that they weren't hurt as well. When police arrived, they searched the wreckage and found plenty of blood, both new and old. While some clearly came from the crash, the older stains in the trunk and the back seat, they belonged to someone else. Someone who probably isn't alive anymore, judging by the quantity. They also found broken liquor bottles, drug paraphernalia, a leather bodysuit, a bag of adult toys, a blow-up doll that had been buckled into the back seat like a real person. It had popped during the crash, but the strangest part about that one was that someone had blacked out the eyes and colored SpongeBob squirt pants on the waist. They didn't just half-ass it either. It was done with a Sharpie and drawn in big, fancy bubble letters, like the actual cartoon. I don't care what the hell people do in or with their own property, but seriously, what the hell? At this point, I'm glad I won't be getting the car back. Even if it wasn't totaled, it would be evidence now anyway. The suspects were described as likely being in their 20s, and the police are still searching the area. But that's all the information that I've been made privy to. Oh, I almost forgot the best part. The officer who gave me this information, he had to ask if any of the items were mine. They weren't, and I understand he had to be sure, but having a 50-something-year-old man explain there's nothing wrong with assisted self-pleasure was a special kind of awkward, one that I never anticipated experiencing. That was the real horror in all of this. Well, thanks for letting me vent. I'm not sure what kind of car I'll get next, but I'm positive it won't be a Kia.